Coaches, today before we get started, I want to thank our sponsor, CoachPad. No matter if you draw scout cards by hand or use a program on your computer, CoachPad will give you back time by never stuffing a binder again before heading out to practice. First 13.3-inch electronic device allowing coaches to clearly display scout cards outdoors in the sun has been a game changer for programs this past fall and those currently planning all across the country. This new technology allows coaches to coach and not the monotonous task of stuffing and dealing with binders on the practice field. Check out the CoachPad and CoachPad Mini on thecoachpad.com. Please make sure you check out our sponsors, our affiliates, and here is another episode of the Gap Down Backer podcast. Welcome to another episode of the Gap Down Backer podcast. Today we have the head football coach at Centerville High School, Brent Ullery. Coach, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
No problem, Coach. John Puckett asked me about 7 times why I haven't had you on yet, and so I was like, John, I don't have his number, and he's here. So,
John's a great guy. It only takes him 7 times to defend half of our passing game. So, every time we run mesh at him, he's got to get a redo.
That's what I've heard from some of your assistants. Before we get into any of that, because I know you love the air raid and all that. Kind of how did you end up as the head football coach at Centerville?
My coaching career started up in 2009 up at Dublin Kaufman High School. I coached for Mark Crabtree, and I thought I'd be there for the rest of my life, and I would just kind of wait him out and try to get a head coaching job after him and stay there. But met my wife; she's a Centerville grad. I ended up back at Centerville back in 2014, and one day I was sitting in my classroom, and our then head coach Rodney Roberts came in and said, I want you to be the offensive coordinator. I'm like, all right, cool. I'll be the offensive coordinator. Sounds like a promotion. I'll do that. And then 2 weeks later, he came in and said, we need to talk. And he sat me down and told me he was resigning, and he was going to move back and move up. And he did some good things for himself, but the job opened up. So within 2 weeks of becoming the offensive coordinator, the head coaching job opened up in 2017. And, by beginning of May, I had finished the interview process and got the head coaching job at my alma mater and everything. It was really cool.
Now you ignored a little fact there about maybe playing college football somewhere.
Yeah, I did. I was a walk-on for 5 years at Ohio State when Tressel was there. That was a phenomenal experience. So I could fill up another podcast with all the stories from those days and all the things I learned from Coach Hazel. Daryl Hazel's the man. He's easily one of the smartest and creative wide receiver coaches that I've ever been around or learned from. So I was very fortunate to be around him for 4 years of my 5 up there.
Yeah, I remember going to a clinic when he was at Kent State, right?
Yep.
And I mean, it was one of the better clinics I've been to. It just really well ran, good time. So I've only heard things. Who else was in that receiver room with you?
Oh, it was loaded. When I walked in, it was guys like Drew Smith and Mike Jenkins, Bam Childers, the only guy to win Mr. Ohio in football and basketball. And then walking in guys like Santonio Holmes, Roy Hall, Ted Ginn Jr., Brian Hartline, Brian Robisky, Ray Small, just a ton of great guys to learn from and super competitive. Anthony Gonzalez, I forgot Gonzo, had a great career with the Colts and then in the U.S. Senate. But it's just a phenomenal room to sit there and learn from and a great group of guys to be around.
Now, kind of going from there is, obviously, Jim Tressel was not known for high-powered offenses in terms of scoring. So how do you go from playing for Jim Tressel, going to Mark Crabtree, who I'm not going to really say is a wide-out throwing guy, but, he's a multiple offense, to running your version of the air raid at Centerville? How does that transition go?
Yeah, Well, the running joke on the sideline with the walk-ons that didn't have much threat of playing on Saturdays when Tressel was there was we'd be down 7 points and look at each other and be like, "Oh man, we're down 3 field goals," and that was kind of how we learned. But we did learn a lot of good things. They opened the playbook up with Ted Ginn, and we learned a lot of new formations and some new concepts. We got into shallow and dig and everything. So I started to kind of learn how to break routes and how to read routes and stuff like that. And when I went to Kaufman, Mark Crabtree started off as triple option guy, but when he got Brady Quinn and he started getting things humming a little bit and started getting some quarterbacks developed, he started opening it up. And what he taught me was the tunnel screen. Like, he taught some great things, and I learned a lifetime's worth from Mark Crabtree. But when it comes to offense, the tunnel screen is, if you don't prepare for our tunnel screen, then we're going to burn you on it. So he taught us that, and kind of got me thinking about throwing the ball a little more okay with, not handing off on first and second down. And then actually, there's an unknown variable in there. Tom Adams got me really into, I think he's at Northmont, but he got me really into some air raid type concepts. And then, our current wide receiver coach, Dan Kearns, he might as well call him the lumberjack because he keeps chopping at you until you start buying into the air raid stuff. So, we started studying it and started getting into it and started realizing some of the things that we wanted to do were air raid. And we're like, okay, well, if we're doing this, then now we have the ability to do this. And before you know it, I wouldn't call us full on air raid because we're still, I think we were at 50-50 last year, run to pass. But I think the air raid offense, correct me if I'm wrong, you're usually about 60-40, 70-30, somewhere in there. But either way, we just started getting into it, and we've had some plays develop out of it that are not air raid that we've kind of made into our own version of air raid, stuff like that. And Chase Harrison kind of took the bull by the horns and said, "Hey, if you want to air it out, I'll help you out." So it's kind of worked for us. It's been a great, a great kind of journey. People ask us what we are as an offense, and some people are wing T or triple or whatever, air raid and something like that. Like, I wouldn't consider us any of those. I would consider us an RPO air raid, if that's a thing. I mean, that's, I think, what we do best is RPO, we air raid.
Yeah. I mean, I'll talk about that a little bit, because I know, especially your run game has begun to evolve. I've talked to Kearns, I talked to you at the state clinic. Obviously, the staple of the air raid has become probably the inside zone. Mm-hmm. But I think a lot of air raid coaches have started, especially transitioning GT counter and other stuff like that. How has yours kind of evolved to kind of adapt to where you are offensively?
Yeah, I mean, well, when we started off, when I got my first year as a head coach and OC, when I was calling it, we were exactly that, an inside zone lock, RPO offense, and we were throwing backside slants off of it. And I hadn't seen many people in the conference do it, at least not do it well. And that was pretty much all we did. We even told our linemen the double team was not important, just stay on it because it's going to be a pass, because everyone in the conference was fighting on it. So, if you want a real quick story about how we got to that, what it is just inside zone lock with a backside slant RPO, but sometimes you clear out the middle of the field and you run a slant behind it from the outside guy. We had a ton of success from it. Guys like Donnie Shelton and Jake Spiewak just lit up our record books. But what's funny, I saw the play on a YouTube suggestion of watch this. Yeah. And it was this guy named Paul, I want to say Paul Christenick, but I think it's Chris Christenick. It doesn't matter. He's out of Texas. And he had all these clips. And I was like, you know what? I saw the author on YouTube. I'm going to look this guy up. So I looked him up on Twitter. He had his DMs open. So I shot him a DM, said, I really want to talk to you about this play that you got on this YouTube little thing you're running here. And he goes, oh, no problem. He responded right away. He took my phone calls. He did sent some presentations to me and stuff. And how he teaches it and how he teaches it to his offense. He sent everything. I still have it, everything. And I showed it to our players. I didn't even tell, like, I told them, I was like, this isn't even me. Like, we're just going to watch this guy's presentation. We're going to watch his cut ups. And I want you guys to go out there and do this. And it took about 2 weeks. And we had a brand new play in our offense that kind of opened our offense wide open, this slant RPO looking thing. And, if anyone's being honest, it was trouble for a lot of people for a while before they started kind of learning and adapting. And we've had to evolve from there. But yeah, we got into that inside zone RPO. I've never been a 2-read RPO. It's always been a single read. It's always been a second level guy. We don't read like defensive end and then linebacker or anything like that. But recently we have gotten more into this run game thing where we're starting to make it look more like outside zone. We're starting to make it look more like power read. And because we are running a lot more outside zone, we're running a lot more power read. We're running our kind of messed up version of GT counter. It's not really that, but now this year we'll be able to throw RPOs off of that. So it's kind of cool to see like what the guys do really well. Like when it all comes down to it, like running backs want to run the ball straight and they want to run the ball fast, and linemen would prefer to block backwards for some reason. I don't know why, but they would prefer to block backwards. So like that's what we're gonna do, and that's what we'll try to do well.
It's all about the angles, coach. That's all it is. It's easy. I'm gonna be honest. It's easy to down block. I mean,
you're 100% right. It's very easy. And what we're seeing is like, when I thought our offense was air raid RPO, I was like, oh, you have to inside zone. You have to inside zone. You get these double teams and just move the nose, move the one, and you'll be okay. Like, no, just let your guard, who's 310 pounds, just annihilate him and live with the rest and read a second level guy and you're okay. So, it's really cool to watch it develop. We got some tricks up our sleeves for some teams this year. We're going to go even further in our development. So they, my receiver coach, Dan Kearns, will call it wing T stuff, but it's not wing T stuff.
Well, I'm not going to hit, like I said, I already asked you his question off screen. So I'm not going to get into that because as fun as Dan Kearns is. Before we kind of go into more stuff, like, and I talked to another guest, I mean, that episode beyond the prior week, but you also got to coach our state all-star game, which I think is an interesting experience. Do you kind of want to talk about that a little bit? Because I think at least our state association at least does a very good job at putting together the all-star game. And obviously, I mean, every coach I talked to on both sides of the ball were very happy with the group of kids they got and how hard they worked and their behavior and everything. Like they were just generally good kids.
Yeah. I remember sitting in a meeting. We were sitting in a District 15 meeting, and Jason Krause was sitting there next to me, and he said, "Hey, Brent," he goes, "you guys had a heck of a season." He goes, "I'm going to nominate you for Coach of the Year because I want you to coach in this game." He's like, "You have to coach in this game." And I remember telling him, like, "Jason, like, I appreciate it. That's an honor, but like, you don't have to do that. I'm extremely busy. Like, it's no sweat off my back if I don't add one more thing." And he's like, "No, you have to do it. You have no idea why. But you have to do it." And I was like, "Okay, whatever. Thanks." Jason and I have developed a pretty good relationship. And so he nominated me, and I got put on that staff as an assistant. And I was kind of hesitant. When going through the draft process, I saw, well, at least I get to coach one of my guys. Cam Smith was a wide receiver. I'm a wide receiver by trade. So like, this will be cool. I can coach wide receivers, and at least I know one guy, and, maybe that'll make it enjoyable. But when I got up there, we started practicing. We practiced at Wittenberg, and then we went up to Massillon and practiced. Like, you start to get to know these guys, like, Rob Page and Kent McCullough and Chad Jackson and Andy Hall, like, and our head coach, Chad Grandstaff, like phenomenal men, that I'm a better coach having spent 4 days around those guys. I don't even know how much better I would be if I spent just a month just in the same room, in the same scenarios, just talking football, bouncing ideas off each other, just staying up late in the hotel room and just talking back and forth and kind of learning from each other. It was a phenomenal experience. And then when you add into that you get to coach like the elite of the elite in Ohio high school football, like you throw out the small little things that you're working on in practice, because these guys want to learn. They want to learn the intricacies of what take them from a good college football receiver to a great college football receiver. They want to know, like, what did you learn from Santonio Holmes? What did Daryl Hazel teach the guys that were going to the NFL? What are those little tiny things that we can look at? And they're all eyes and ears, and they give great effort, and they're just a phenomenal group to coach. Like I couldn't be happier with the group of receivers that we chose. You know, they're phenomenal football players, but you know, that's just surface. I'm telling you, underneath it, they were phenomenal young men, and you know, it was a good time hanging out with all of them.
Good. Like I said, I sat with a couple of you at dinner that one night, and like I said, it seems like all of you got along real well. I know Kent and Rob pretty well. So like I said, I thought you guys did a fantastic job, and like I said, obviously the game was interesting, but that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
Because I was staying on the opposite sideline while all that was going on. So, Jesus. But a couple other things. Like, I mean, one thing I was told to ask you about, because I've heard this, and it wasn't just from talking to one of your sisters, but I heard it, I think a year or two ago. Yeah, your quarterback club meetings. I think that's a very interesting thing you do with a lot of your dads and your quarterback club. Do you want to kind of break down what you kind of do with them? I think it's a very interesting approach to going over stuff a couple times a year with some of your dads and your quarterback club.
Sure. Yeah. Like the quarterback club is our fundraising booster, you know, our organization. That's who we raise money through, and that's who buys us, you know, jerseys or, you know, whatever, new tackling dummies, stuff like that, pays for our huddle. So they have to raise money. And one of the ways they raise money is by having membership. And in order to try and spike membership, I don't know who, many coaches probably do this, but I got the idea from Mark Crabtree up at Dublin. It was, you know, just host a film session. He used to host them every week. I don't really have the time for that with little kids and a wife and just sleep in general. But we offer it. We say, listen, 3 times a year. So we do one a month. We do a game in August, a game in September, and a game in October. We're going to go up there. I'm going to bring somebody, my defensive coordinator, you know, John Puckett will probably do all 3 of them with me this year. And we go up there and we show them our huddle. We keep our banner turned on so they can see all the play names and everything. And we walk through, like, why did we call what we called and what is happening on the film? And, you know, who is the person that's doing exceptionally well on this play to make it successful? Or, you know, what kid is, you know, missed assignment or missed technique or something like that. And that's why the play is breaking down. And we go through every single play of the game. The parents, it's mostly dads, but they can all ask questions. They can stop and say, hey, you know, why didn't the quarterback read front side here instead of backside? And we'll answer it, you know, and we'll tell them what the scouting report says and everything. And then at the end of it, after we finish the game, by then we've already done all of our film session, film study and all that stuff for the next opponents. The scouting report's already done because it's a Monday night. So everything's done for the next opponent. So we'll go through it and tell them, like, this is what you're going to see next week. You know, Springboro is going to line up like this. This guy is going to be their stud. This is the guy we're going to target the most, et cetera, et cetera. These are the plays that you're going to kind of see us attacking them with, and from these formations, et cetera. You know, we go a little bit more in depth. We don't give away the whole magic show, but, you know, we do give away a lot of information to these guys and let them ask some questions and everything. And it's a really good night. You know, it's a nice 2 hours. There's always food. The guys are, you know, usually drinking beer or something, but it's a good time for everybody. But there's one rule with the quarterback club film sessions, and we always say it at the beginning of every season, and that's, you know, everyone's welcome. Moms are welcome even though they don't show up, but everyone's welcome to join the quarterback club and be part of these film sessions. But if anyone catches wind that you're up there in the stands saying, you know, what the heck is Coach Ullery calling, or what are we doing? This stuff isn't working, whatever. Anyone that's bad mouthing the play calling or bad mouthing the coaching staff or the players, you're not welcome, you know? So we said it the first time. I remember delivering the message, and then the next time after that, a few people didn't show up, but we haven't had that problem ever since. So it's been kind of a cool little wrinkle we added to it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a good way to help deal with, obviously, in this day and age, some parents and build. And I think it really just builds a good rapport. I mean, like we're going to hold our mom's night next Monday, just to kind of help build relationships. There'll be food, go over kind of our program. And I mean, it's kind of the same concept. I mean, just kind of building that culture aspect. The other thing I want to talk about, because obviously you guys are you're one of the bigger schools in the Dayton area, but you're also just one of the bigger, you're in our big division across the state. But at the same time, you still have some kids that have to go 2 ways here or there, or back up at offense position. How do you structure your practice schedule so you have some depth, but it isn't like a bunch of freshmen or sophomores that maybe aren't ready for big time Division I, especially because, I mean, your schedule isn't easy. I mean, Just be honest. Like, it's probably the hardest conference in the Dayton area. Like, it can be brutal at times, especially on the air. Heck, you play Springfield. They just went to the state championship game.
Mhm.
It is what it is. But
Yeah.
how do you
We would
develop that?
argue, we would argue our conference is probably the toughest one in the state. People want to say GCL this and Cleveland that. Come on down, and let's play. But our conference is extremely well coached with a ton of great players, and you're right, it's extremely tough, and you can't go into it with guys that have no experience at all. So what we did is actually we addressed this issue big time going into last season. And let me just preface it by saying we're not changing anything because it worked so well. So my defensive coordinator, John Puckett, actually asked, he brought it up. He's like, we need to do something about, having some guys here, guys there, et cetera. And he was right. And it sparked a discussion in our staff meeting. And we talked about the Pick Centrals and the Coleraines of the world, the public schools that are, playing top tier high school football. And you look out there, they're all playing both ways. Now, not every single player, but you look at, Colerain's stud running back is also playing linebacker. Pick Central's stud receiver is also playing corner. Stuff like that, like they have a bunch of guys. So we're like, okay, let's figure out who does this the best. And, rather than go to one of those two, we had recalled that Nate Moore up at Massillon had like written an article or something, been interviewed about, his way of having whatever he called it, a 1 platoon team with a 2 platoon staff or something like that. So I just called him. I cold called him or I cold texted him and said, hey, I need your help. This is, Brent Ullery at Centerville, whatever. He responded right away. He sat on the phone with me for about an hour explaining this thing. And then I called him a couple more times after that. And he, each one about a half hour, and he'd walk me through the troubleshooting and stuff and what to expect. And he was dead on every single time. But we just do what Massillon does. So what we do is every single player on our team, I shouldn't say every single one, 95% of our team is going to play 2 positions. You got your quarterback who sits over there and he's made of porcelain, right? But like other than that, there's a couple guys that just won't do it. Like this year, our running back won't play both ways. Our center is not playing both ways, but all the other O linemen are. One of our quarterbacks is, one of them's playing both ways. But anyways, what we do is you take your team and you take like your like, let's just call it, say you're starting your 1s and your 2s, and you chop them both in half, and then you mix half the 1s with half the 2s and half these 1s with half the 2s, and you just practice. And we run a normal practice. You miss out on kind of the frills of, oh, we're going to have a specific, power read period. We don't have those. We have inside run, but we don't have a specific power read and then a specific outside zone and then another RPO period or anything like that. We just have we have inside run, we get after it, we have team, we have 7-on-7, and then that takes about an hour, and then we flip it. And the other guys you go over there, we call it a black practice. Practice 1's called a black practice. Practice 2's called a gold practice. And you hear the whistle get blown, gold practice time. And they go back through the whole thing. They'll have individual with the other side of the ball, and they'll have inside run and 7-on-7 and, pursuit drill or whatever that day is. You sprinkle in a couple special teams and you've got to practice. And that's usually how our summers operate, for the most part, without going too far in depth and boring everybody. But then you get to the summer, and Nate was very adamant about this. He was like, you know what? Because I asked him, I was like, well, I can't just run these guys out in week 1 against Fairfield and say this is the first time you've played together and go try to beat Fairfield. It won't happen. He was like, I know. He said, after the first scrimmage is when your black practice, let's say, becomes your 1s on offense and your 2s on defense. And then your gold practice becomes your 1s on defense and your 2s on offense. And then that's kind of how you practice, but you still split, you still switch and swap and do all the things that you do. And we loved it. It created a ton of depth for us and a ton of options for us to be able to run. At one point we were playing 7 or 8 offensive linemen, played like 6 tight ends, 2 or 3 running backs. I mean, we probably played, 8 or 9 wide receivers. Defensively, we probably rolled 8, 9 guys through the secondary, 4 or 5 guys through the linebacker positions. And, however many D linemen it took, we had all kinds of options, and we were doing it with juniors and seniors that were really good, and they were able to play at that high level. And because they know they're going to get a blow, they can empty the tank and get a blow on another side of the ball or something like that. But it was phenomenal. Nate Moore at Massillon. Like, if anyone's listening to this and they're thinking about it, look up whatever article. I hope I don't send a bunch of people calling Nate Moore. He'll probably get mad at me, but like, look up his article and read it, and if you have a hard time understanding it, feel free to give me a call. I'll split the load with Nate, so he taught me, and I'll be happy to tell anyone else, but it works out phenomenal. It's a great process. So we have a ton. It's not normal for big schools, but we're doing it. We're going both ways.
Oh yeah. I mean, you kind of have to at times. That is what that is. I mean, you got to prepare for injuries. But kind of continuing from there, I mean, because I want to swing back, because when we talked run game earlier, you talked about building RPOs, and I think that's something that air raid people have started slowly integrating. Where did you go to start pulling in the air raid? Obviously, you had your little slant inside zone RPO, but how else have you kind of built from there?
Well, Tom Adams taught us the mesh play. Ironically, Mark Crabtree taught me the Urban Meyer Utah play, which is built off the mesh play, but I didn't even know the mesh play existed. We just ran the Utah, the little like pivots out, with the dig behind it. Tom Adams taught me that mesh play, and I started digging more into it. And the more I dug into it, the more I realized, mesh is like inside zone, kind of like, depends on who you're talking to. You might get a different definition of it completely, and everybody's got their, oh, this is a wheel, this is where you set it, this is what you say. Like, dude, chill out. Like, it's just football. We can figure this out on the fly. Once we got into that, and once I started really studying, there's a ton of free resources on YouTube and a ton of free resources on Twitter and everything. I started really diving in. I was like, man, I really like this Z shallow. I really like this drive concept, and I would say that I was into air raid before I knew that all that stuff was air raid, if that makes sense. I started it started seeing like, oh, they all work together, and I can, I can tag this on this side and this on this side, and we can just go, or we can just call this, blah, blah, blah. And it was kind of organic, and now it's to the point where, like yesterday, our quarterbacks went out there, and I told them strictly, do not call anything other than quick game. That was like quicks, slants, and outs. And that was it. That was all they were allowed to call. And I look out there, and the kids are running mesh, they're running Utah, they're running choice reads and everything. They're running drive concepts. I'm like, what's going on? It's like, it's in our DNA now. Like, we haven't even taught those things yet. And all these kids, even the young pups, are out there running this stuff and running it pretty well. It's all right. Okay. Maybe we're air raid, and nobody wants to admit it, because Centerville used to be triple option for about half a century, but it's all right. It's been good.
Now, I know you weren't there for like the full transition from triple to where you are now, but how was that evolution from triple to there? Because I know, that was God forever. They ran, and they had some success for a while with it. What was that transition like from triple to air raid?
The hardest part was the quarterback. He had never dropped back and thrown anything. I mean, his name was Will Vance, greatest kid in the entire world, like awesome. He'll tell you, like, he was not a drop back passer. We tried to force that square peg through the round hole, and it got ugly. And we window dressed it. The screens bailed us out of a lot of games, and the triple option mentality of the offensive line and running back, even though we were running inside zone and power, really bailed us out, because if you really want to run gap schemes, like, go to a team that's running triple option and teach them to run gap schemes, because they will just blow apart the entire middle of the defense, because they're used to coming off the ball that hard, and they don't care what you're doing as a front. They're just going to destroy you. So that was, we did well with those things, but the drop back pass game was rough, and the receivers part of it was rough to say, to be kind. Like guys hadn't caught a ball in traffic before, guys hadn't read the middle. They didn't even know what coverages were. Like they're just looking out there, like we're talking one safety, two safety, middle field open, middle field closed. They had no idea what we were talking about. And it was a very long learning process, to where we had to start attacking it at the lower levels and start to get it to filter up. We had to make throwing the ball fun, and we had to make it part of their, when they're at recess, are they going to run pass routes? Like we want them to say, hey, I'm running the shallow and I'm running the dig. Like we want them to be able to say that in 5th grade. So that's kind of how we attacked it. We went low and said, we're going to start building this thing from the ground up and let it filter through our program. And we got some nice things in place right now that are doing that for us, which is probably why you're seeing quarterbacks and receivers and everything getting better and better and better at Centerville. But it was brutal at the beginning. And then I would say about my first year, 2017, is when we first had our first group of receivers that knew, how to play wide receiver, and quarterbacks that knew how to read it. Linemen that understood this is an RPO, hang on the double team a little bit longer, stuff like that. So yeah, it took a while. It was rough. It was very rough.
Now, you mentioned your youth program there. One, how much control over your youth program do you have? And two, how do you typically work with them? Because so every school is different. Like I'm very hands-on with our youth program. I try to work with them as much as possible, because obviously it's a very important integral part, but I know other coaches that don't have any conversation with it, or other programs that is just a bad mix. They just don't get along. So how do you approach your youth program?
Kind of a hybrid. I'll talk to them. I'll make a lot of appearances and everything. I definitely address the entire youth organization, coaching staff, all the levels and all that stuff. I don't necessarily think that they need to be running air raid in 2nd grade. They can barely wrap their hand around the ball. Do whatever you want, run whatever offense you want. It's okay. Like my rules to them are, I have 2 of them. It's give them the fundamentals. They got to learn how to block and tackle, and specifically tackle. They've got to be safe, or else mom ain't letting them come back out. So block and tackle, and teach them the fundamentals. And the second rule is they have to have fun, and they got to come back. So I challenge every coach to follow their team year to year and see, like, what do the numbers look like when you go from 5th grade to 6th grade? Does it go from 41 to 45, or does it go from 41 to 36?
Yeah.
And that's the big challenge. And I tell them, like, we can't coach these kids if they don't come out. So we have to do whatever we can to get them out and keep them out. And then you do that by teaching them new things, letting them have some fun, and let them experience some success. And as long as they got good relationships with their team and a good relationship with their coaches and stuff, they'll keep coming back. But it's worked out for us right now. I'm not dumb enough to think that I got all the answers and I figured it out, but it's working out for us right now. And that's about where it stops. I don't really care if they run man zone, gap scheme, inside zone, outside zone, stuff like that. Pee-wees are wacky too. Like you look out there and you're like, man, that's a 10-man box. But the quarterback can't throw it 7 yards. So, they don't have an answer for it.
Oh yeah.
So, they just hand it off to the fastest guy and let him run around outside. And, as long as the other kids touching the ball and they're having fun, they'll come back.
Yeah, come back. Exactly. That's perfect. Now, the last question I have for you is, we've kind of danced around it a little bit. Mesh, it's your defensive coordinator's least favorite play, but at the same time, I think you've kind of mentioned it's kind of your staple of your offense, and obviously Mike Leach runs 9,000 versions of it.
Yeah.
So you mentioned everybody runs it a little differently, but why is it such an important play for you guys? And then is there any tips or tricks that you would suggest to anybody that might be looking to install it?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, it's not a staple of our offense. It's a staple of what you have to defend in our offense. Well, we only run it enough. I'll admittingly say, like, we're not the best mesh team in the world. We're a phenomenal Utah team. Like, we can run Utah, and I hope I'm using Utah as a universal language as the pivots versus the mesh crossers. But we're phenomenal at this Utah play. So that's where we're going to spend our money in games, but we will call the mesh and we'll run the thing. It didn't become as good for us and as much of a problem for my DC and other DCs as well, until we saw Ohio State run it. So like if I was someone looking to run mesh and looking to make some adjustments, like I would watch Ohio State and Paris Campbell run mesh. Like it was ridiculous what we saw when we started breaking down their film. There used to be like this underground library where you had every game and all this stuff, and I had access to it. It's since dead now, but I would watch Ohio State and Paris Campbell and these guys run mesh in all these different variations, and you could tell they're just calling mesh and they're just tagging something. They're calling X mesh or Z mesh or Y mesh or whatever. And when we put in that middle crosser, that window route, whatever you see Paris Campbell running and always wide open as soon as guys are doing this in front of the quarterback, that's when it became a huge issue, because linebackers are getting an undercall, they're getting a double undercall, and they're supposed to robot out to the dig window. And here this guy is sitting in the middle dig window. It takes special coaching to defend that play. I will say this, if I was somebody starting off with the mesh play, I would take the 2x2 part of the playbook and I'd throw it away. I don't believe in 2x2 mesh anymore at all. Not to say we haven't run it or we won't run it against certain looks, but 2x2 mesh is, I think, a waste of time. I think 3x1, set your formation to the field and either motion to empty or go start and empty and go from there, because the 2x2 stuff is just too cluttery. It's not a good look for the quarterbacks, at least the quarterbacks, the way that I'm coaching them. I haven't been very good at coaching 2x2 mesh. So I'd start with the 3x1 or the empty, and I'd watch Ohio State if I was somebody. But that's what gives people a lot of fits, is when you get this and then you got this guy just sitting right behind them. It's like, oh my gosh, what do we do? Their answer is to press them, and if you can't get off press, you're not going to be opening any route anyway, so it doesn't matter. So that's the best way, is as a defense, you just be really good. You don't have to worry about it.
Oh yeah, I agree 100%, coach. I mean, we got our second 7-on-7. I know the team is just going to press the crap out of us. I already know that because I know who it is, and it is what it is. So you just got to get really good at getting off mesh. High school kids don't like contact. They don't. They just don't. So, Coach, I appreciate you coming on. Coaches, his Twitter will be in the bio if you want to give him a follow. Check out our sponsors, affiliates, all that lovely jazz below. Like, share, subscribe, all that jazz. Check out CoachPad. And then that was another episode of the Gap Down Backer podcast.